But now we're also legit because, go ahead, you can do it. We can do things like, yes, we're going to be those people,
Yes.
depending on the mood.
That's going to be the red button is going to be my favorite.
You're listening to the Restoration Podcast, conversations of hope and healing. Join us as we talk about subjects dealing with ministry, faith, everyday life, and other hot topics. Our prayer is that these conversations bring encouragement to your life.
So when are you going to change your youth group's name to Scott's Tots?
Never.
Why?
Because it's not ever going to happen. Because they're not tots.
I think that'd be perfect.
I don't think it'd be good at all.
If my name were Scott and I were a youth pastor, that's what my youth group would be called, Scott's Tots.
That's because you have bad taste.
Whatever. So we haven't done this like this, just me and you, since November.
Correct.
Can you believe that?
I can, because we were hyper-fixated on having cool guests.
So what's funny is we thought it was going to be like this every time, where we just talked about like different stuff, and I'm still down to do that periodically, but we were like, it'd be cool if we had a guest, and then they just kept lining up. It was kind of cool, but here we are again, you know? So we had what? A missionary, our next gen director, a mental health counselor.
We had her twice. We had a few of our pastors multiple times. Church members.
Yeah, it was cool. I like it. And we're still learning what this is going to be like. So, and Pastor Scott using in-ears for the first time today. Yes. As you can see, as he's adjusting them.
It's kind of miserable.
No, they're not miserable. They just take getting used to.
I don't like them as much as I thought I would.
I wear them every Sunday and Wednesday. So if anyone's watched carefully and you see this little thing in my ear, it's basically headphones.
It's a hearing aid.
It's not a hearing aid, not yet. My hearing does probably going to have significant damage because I do jam out pretty loud. And then I listen at dangerous decibel levels, but you only live once, right? No. But anyway, Pastor Scott's using in-ears for the first time. We're in the process of finding headphones for this as well.
Yes.
Just because
we're going to look like real podcasters with the
right?
cool headphones.
Just because it makes more sense when you have multiple people. It gets overwhelming if you can't hear yourself or who you're talking to or whatever.
And it just makes it like, no, we can't like mishear somebody. I can hear you crisp and clear.
And then whenever we're hearing the output as we're recording, like we are now, we can tell if there's any kind of audio issue. Whereas up to this point, we kind of just like crossed our fingers and recorded, and then in post, we were like, oh, there was an issue here. Whereas now I'll hear it as we go.
Can you explain to them what this is?
Yes, and we also got a new audio little mixer thing. Before we were just using. Not yet. Before we were using just a regular audio interface. You audio people, audio nerds know exactly what that is. Basically a box you plug into your MacBook, and they work great. They're really good quality, and I've been impressed, and I have no complaints with that quality. However, when we have 3 people, we had to use a box that is used for our students' worship. So the way they run their tracks is through one of those interfaces. And it has we can put up to 4 mics in it. So anytime we had 3 people on the podcast, which has been recently, it's been pretty great. I had to pull it from the students. Mm-hmm. And so we learned very quickly when I do that and connect it to a new device. I don't know if you understood this or not, but when I plug it back into your tracks MacBook, it went haywire.
Yes.
So we had to reroute the tracks. I had to do that 2 times. And it's just back and forth, back and forth. So Pastor Bill, our executive pastor, approved us to get this guy. We're using a Tascam Mixcast 4, which is a podcast-specific piece of equipment.
Super cool.
It's really cool. It looks cool. I was counting down the days for it to get here and delivered here. And then the day came, I counted down the hours and minutes. But now we're also legit because, go ahead, you can do it. We can do things like, yes, we're going to be those people.
Yes.
Depending on the mood.
That's going to be, the red button is going to be my favorite.
So anyway, and we'll learn more about this as we go, but this is a really neat piece of equipment. It's going to make life easier for us, less editing post, because Pastor Scott and I, contrary to popular belief, so a lot of people know what pastors do on Sundays and Wednesdays, but they don't really know what we do throughout the week. And we do a lot throughout the week, correct?
Yeah, I get the whole people are like, oh, your job's easy because you're a youth pastor. You just get to sit at a desk, and it's like,
And I get the, all you do is choose songs.
yeah, it's not as
There's
easy.
a lot we do. And this week was a perfect example because last night we had
Our all church hygiene hygiene kit
hygiene
packing
kit
night
packing night,
for the gospel mission.
which was amazing.
Super quick with all that. I know the Bible verse that says many hands make light work, and that was very true because it was so quick.
And what was cool about it was, what I liked about it was the whole family was a part of it.
Oh yeah.
All ages. We had a lot of multi-generational interaction.
It was
that
fun.
You don't really get on so on Sunday, we come, we say hello in the lobby and stuff, but most of the time we sit, worship, pray, hear the message, and then it's a, hey, how you doing? Bye, see you next week. Here it was just full of fellowship. And we have 3 services every Sunday, 8:30, 10, 11:30. And so some people that come to 10 don't know people that come to 8:30 and 11:30 and all that. So there was a lot of interaction, people that know each other. We were like, each little bag, each little kit had like, what were the items? Nail clippers and toothbrushes.
I don't know. I was in charge of packing the trailer with the boxes.
So how it worked was we had like our gymnasium with long tables down both sides, and we basically had to pack these hygiene kits. So like soap and toothpaste, nail clippers, and whatever. How many did we put together? Do you know?
I believe from what Pastor Johnny said that there was 1,000 of them.
That sounds right. So we had to pack them together, put them in boxes, put them in a trailer, and take them to the Sioux City Gospel Mission. So, and it's a thing for the community, spreading hope and healing physically.
Yeah, so last year we did it for Convoy of Hope. So we packed the same kits for Convoy of Hope, but this year we wanted to give them to the Gospel Mission, and so
Local.
we got something local, something
cool.
that's going to affect our community. So we packed them, and
Yeah.
it went pretty smooth.
It was really cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to what I was saying. So this week is a perfect example of what do pastors do during the week? Well, our whole team had to prep the gym for that.
Yep.
The stuff came last week. We had to move those pallets in the gym, set up the tables, get the flow, and talk about how many people here, how we're going to do this, how we're going to do that. And then the day before, we had a celebration of life service, which when we have those during the week, we need all hands on deck because that takes a lot of work. And the lady that passed away was a longtime member. And so we had a funeral, celebration of life, excuse me, and then we had a packing night. And then tonight there is a board meeting, which doesn't affect you or I because we don't attend those.
Yeah.
But some of our pastors do attend those.
Yep.
So it's just on the calendar, you know.
Yep.
On top of that, prepping for Sunday. So what do we do during the week? This is a good example. There's been a lot going on. And that's just this week. Each week is different. Also, why not share? We also each week have a designated pastor called Pastor of the Week. Pastor Scott, what is that? Pastor of the Week.
So the pastor of the week is the pastor that gets to go and gets the privilege of going and seeing anybody that we have in the hospital. We have a few church members that are in nursing homes, and so we'll go and see them, pray with them, talk to them, make sure that they have someone there for them. And so every week it's a different pastor. And honestly, when I first started, hospital visits were something I was very nervous about because I'd never done them, but I've actually become to enjoy them because the lady that passed away that we did our celebration of life for, I actually would have never gotten to know her that well if I had not went and saw her in the hospital. And so I got to build a relationship with her and her husband and get to know them and talk and stuff like that. And so the hospital visits sometimes can be heavy, but they're definitely something that I get to enjoy doing.
I was going to say that you never know what you're going to walk into.
Yes.
Because sometimes we know about someone in advance. They've been in the hospital for a while, or sometimes it's like, oh, there was just an accident. Like there was one I went to go see. We did that one together. It was one of your first ones.
It was because that was my first one going to.
That's right.
Because
Yeah.
you went to see him and I went to see.
So your very first one, I went with you because you asked me to because you had never done it, and I said sure, I'll go. And I was still kind of new to it, and it's a good thing I went because you went to see a lady, and I went to see a guy. The guy I went to see was just in a major car accident.
Yeah.
And he's Hispanic, and his dad was there. His dad didn't speak any English; he only spoke Spanish. And I was like, you know what? It's a good thing I came.
Yeah. So you went and saw them, and then the lady that passed away
Yeah.
this week. We did her celebration of life. I got to go meet her and her husband and talk with them. So that was probably one of my favorite core memories from being here. So
Yeah, so like I said, you never know with those things, and so we do that throughout the week, and that rotates whichever pastor does that. Our staff also has prayer time together on Mondays and Wednesdays. Wednesdays we pray over prayer cards first thing, and then Tuesdays we have our big staff meeting every week. So the staff gathers together. We go over what's coming up, recap that past Sunday, plan things.
Make sure we're all on the same page for events and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And then usually after the staff, we all get to go and fellowship at lunch together and grow our relationships as a team. So
Yeah.
that's
And
one of my favorite parts of the
Same
week.
here. I look forward to Tuesdays I mean, I love planning stuff, okay? But I love food. Okay.
I love
Who doesn't love
food
food?
and fellowship.
There you go. The fellowship is great. And so, yeah, our weeks are usually pretty jam-packed. So it's more than just, I have a very good friend from college. When I told him I was going to be a worship pastor, and he said it he was being funny. He's like, all you got to do is pick songs. I could do that in 5 minutes. And I'm like, there's more than that. And so that's pretty cool. But yeah, this week's been pretty jam-packed.
Yeah, pretty busy.
But I like busy. You know what I mean? A
Oh, yeah,
busy
I mean, it
church
makes it-
is an impacting church.
Yep. And it makes the day go by a little quicker.
Yeah.
When you're in stuff and you're doing
There's
stuff.
nothing to do. Or like when multiple pastors are on vacation and it's just like you in the office and another person. It's like tumbleweed.
Let's be real. Anytime Aaron's in the office alone, he always, every time I come back, I'm like, you miss me? He goes, nope, I got a lot of work done.
It's true.
Because usually I have him help me with projects that I know nothing about.
And vice versa. So I help Pastor Scott with this. He helps me with that. So we fill our weeks up pretty good.
Yep.
But
Always helping.
But hey, so we haven't sat here, just me and you, since like November. So I thought maybe go over some highlights from then and now.
Jeez. That's a lot.
Not everything, but I'm talking more recently. So, for example, you just had youth camp.
Yeah, we had
How was that?
45 students.
That's
and
amazing.
Talking with our secretary that's been here a very long time, she said that was, from her recollection, that's the most.
That's great. Sorry, late on that. Okay.
That's the most students we've ever had go to summer camp in the recent past. And so we had 45 students, 7 leaders, and there was one student specifically who felt called to ministry. There was a lot of our students that rededicated their life and recommitted their life to God. A lot of our students committed to be campus missionaries in their school, being able to go and minister the gospel to people in their schools, which was something that was very encouraging and very exciting to see that our students are passionate about that. And I've had a lot of awesome, just real honest conversations with students. Like the last night at camp, there was 4 young ladies that are in junior high that they were like, Pastor Scott, come here. And I came over and I was like, what's up? And they started asking me questions about the Holy Spirit and speaking in tongues.
Cool.
And so I got the opportunity because our speaker at camp talked about speaking in tongues, and they understood it. They were filled. They spoke in tongues, but they just wanted to make sure and clear up some stuff that was muddy in their brains. So we just got to talk over that for about 30 minutes and clear everything up. And I'm like, and it was just really refreshing to see some students that were excited about it. Sometimes you go to camp and they come back and it's just same old. But I've seen a lot of students and talked to a lot of students that are still very passionate and
That's awesome.
ready to go.
That's exciting. I saw another youth pastor friend of mine, and this isn't like super original. I'm sure lots of youth pastors have said this, but he went to camp too with his students, and he said his prayer for that time was that camp wouldn't be the pinnacle of the students' spiritual lives, but it would be a launching point.
Yeah, that's
Not the peak, but just
That's what I always say to our students right before we leave. Every time we're that morning when we get here, we get ready to leave, the first thing I always say is I'm like, hey guys, we can either let this be another point where we just go to camp, experience what a true relationship with God feels like because we're consistently seeking Him, we're consistently going after Him, or we can let this be a launching point for you guys personally, for their lives and their ministries and their futures and stuff like that, and also for our youth group. Let it be a launching point. So this would be a place that hurting people can come and be ministered to, have a bunch of teenagers around that aren't talking bad about them, aren't gossiping, but care and love them, because at the end of the day, us leaders can love them and we can be here for them, but ultimately they're looking for the students for acceptance a lot of the times.
Yeah.
So.
And then this year you're doing something that you haven't done before. You're going back for a second week.
Yes.
So you, right? Yeah, explain that.
So this it was about 4 months ago. Our network Next Gen director, Pastor Ryan Yates, he contacted me and asked me if I would like to be a part of the rec staff team. And I had done this rec staff stuff we called it something different at the other church I was at, but I did the same along the
Explain
same
what
lines.
rec staff is.
Rec staff are the guys that put together, set up, and run all of the games that we do during camp.
Yeah.
And like I always like to say to my students, we're not there for the games, but the games are also a time where we get to bond and have fun.
They're
And,
important.
yeah, they're fun.
thought out,
It's
yeah.
a time to just see some skills get to be used that don't get to be used worshiping Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And so. I'll be going next week. I leave Sunday right after church. I'm gonna drop my wife off at her parents' house so she can hang out with her family and have the kids over there. And then I'm driving to Ogden, Iowa, and to our AG campground, and I'll be helping set up everything for camp. I'm really excited to fellowship with some new youth pastors that I haven't gotten to meet.
Yeah.
I'm excited to fellowship with some pastors I have gotten to meet, but I haven't gotten to hang out with.
And you'll get to this time because you won't have your youth group that you're responsible
correct.
for.
So I won't be having to make sure. That was one thing when I asked Pastor Johnny if it would be all right if I went and did rec staff. He was like, "Well, are any of your students going that week?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "Well, that's okay." He's like, "When your students go, he's like, I just want you to be with your students." And I was like, "I totally agree because I don't think it's fair to them that their youth pastor take them down there and then just work the whole time and not get to hang out with them." So I know that just the fellowship in the high school boys dorm this year, like there were students that when we first got to camp that were in the high school dorm that were a little standoffish, a little like, I don't really know you guys. You're not really my friends. You're just people I go to church with. And only way I can explain it is by the time we left, everybody in our dorm were really good friends. Which was really cool because
that's the thing that only can happen at camp sometimes.
Yeah, and it's funny because you see people in church, these students see other students, and they're just kind of like, oh yeah, like I know you go to church, blah blah, but they don't ever try to pursue having a friendship with each other. And then it's like camp, it's like you're forced to be in a room with someone you don't know, and so you get to grow with them. And so it's cool to get to take some students that haven't gone before. We had 2 boys from Ponca that haven't gone to camp with us before that got to go to camp and. We got to talk to them, grow with them, and so it was awesome. Like,
yeah, camp's great. You also see like the quiet kids come out of their shell, and all those camp memories. We've all had them. I actually only went to youth camp once. Our church was a lot more so into Fine Arts Festival. We've talked about that before. It's Assembly's a God thing that helps students equip. What are the 3 things I should know? Some equip and
no, it's it's a word to fit.
I should know. That's embarrassing,
dude. It's like on the tip of my brain.
It'll come back to you. But anyway, we were very heavy into that, and we didn't do youth camp as heavily. But I did go once, and it was a really good experience. You're still thinking about it, aren't you?
Discover, develop, deploy.
Where did I get equipped from?
Yeah, you're because I knew it was 3 of the same letters, but I'm like, I don't think E is the right word.
Qualified, no.
Discover, develop, deploy.
That's it. Discover. What is it?
Discover,
discover, develop, and deploy. Got it. So it helps students discover their gifts. So are they gifted at drawing, singing, preaching? Develop because they prepare a presentation, and then hopefully after deploy. And I shared this on one of our very first episodes. I'm a product of that, so that's what I believe fully that's why I'm doing what I do. But anyway, we were heavy into that, and youth convention, the thing you'll do in the fall.
Yeah, we
were very heavy into that as well. Camp wasn't so much an emphasis under the youth pastor I was under, but I did go once, and it was a really great time. So camp's awesome.
I love that our district, the District of Iowa, they have like almost something at every point in
season,
the year.
Right? Yeah.
Like we have summer camp, of course. We have fall convention, and then one of our bigger churches in Iowa, they do what they call a live conference.
Yeah, that's a big one.
So I feel like everything is so spread out so well that it's like you can have like new students come and they might get to go to a smaller event before they get to go to camp, which is good because summer camp can be a lot for new students that have never been to church before and stuff, but it's also one of the places I always encourage students to go. Like this year, I put a big emphasis on students going to summer camp because I know what I encountered at summer camp, and I encountered a true relationship with God because I was pressing in. The people, everybody around me that I was hanging out with, talking with, they were pressing in and they were excited about the things of God.
Yeah.
And so I know that when I go to camp, it's one of those moments where it's like, man, I explain it this way. you go as a youth pastor, you go through a lot of trials and troubles with teenagers because they're just teenagers.
Yeah, that's
they're
how they
trying to
are.
figure out things. They're have stresses, they have anxieties, they have things that they're going through that they're trying to process and figure out. And sometimes that stuff gets thrown on a youth pastor. Situations happen, it gets thrown on a youth pastor. But when you're at summer camp and you see all these students that have been struggling, you see students that have been struggling to understand and get what you've been preaching, and then you see them step in and push into the things of God, and you have those moments where I had a young lady that has gone here since I've been here, and even before, and she came over to me, and we were taking a time in service where to prophesy, and she prophesied over me, and it was a refreshing, and it was a refreshing word that I needed, and in that moment I was just like, man, I'm so proud. These are the moments that's like, this is why we do it. This is why we put up.
What's
and,
our tagline for
yeah,
that?
we get to
We
do
get
this.
to do this. Yeah.
And so for me, it's like when you have those moments, even on a normal Wednesday night,
Yeah.
when the Lord moves and you see students get impacted. Like we had a Wednesday where we had a girl, I had a student that the Lord had highlighted to me to be prayed over, and then the Lord highlighted another student to pray over her, and she was healed instantly right then and there. And it's like, this is why we do it. It's so this generation can see and experience the things of God and know that, this is real. This isn't something that I can just baby around with anymore, play around with anymore. Like eternity is for real.
Yeah. That's awesome. And I hadn't actually got to talk to you since till now, sit down about camp. So I didn't know that about, you said one student felt a call to the ministry. That's amazing. Our very own pastor, Pastor Johnny, he got called at camp.
Yeah, I got called to ministry at camp.
We were at our district council, which is what we go to every spring and gather with all the Assemblies of God pastors in Iowa. And there's a specific pastor who kind of oversees that campsite. And he always asks the question, raise your hand if you, because it's a room full of pastors. Said, raise your hand if you got called at camp. And so many hands go up.
One of the speakers at camp read a percentage that blew my mind.
What was it?
So he was talking about, they did a study of a certain group of Christian adults, and they asked them, what age did you come to know Christ?
And so what did you think that answer would be?
I thought it was going to be like 65, 55% came to know Christ at a young age.
Gotcha. Okay.
Before they were 18. Because this is how he said it. He said, what do you think the percentage is of people that came to know Christ before they turned 18, so in their youth years? And I was thinking, it's probably like 65, 75%. He said 96% of people that participated in that study came to know Christ, became a Christian, got saved in their teenage years. So the other 4% was after that.
Wow.
And so it's like, to think about that, like the majority of probably, even our church maybe, the majority of them probably received Christ at a younger age, when you hear people's stories, it's, oh yeah, I accepted Christ at a young age. Not to say that people don't stray away and come back, but it was a little mind blowing to hear that, so many at such a young age. Like it's in youth ministry, it's like, man, now we really got to start hustling. And the campus missionary side of things, when our Youth Alive director for Illinois, the Illinois district, he was our speaker at week 1, and he was talking about and encouraging our students become campus missionaries. And I emphasize that even more to our students because for me personally, it's been very hard to almost impossible. Actually, I haven't gotten a yes. So it's been impossible for me to get into
Plugged in
a school.
Well, and pause there. Times are very different now.
Yes,
than
very.
they were when we were growing up. But continue.
Yeah, and so times are very different. They're a little more secure about who they let in and stuff. And I understand.
We want
we
that.
protect our kids. They're protecting their kids. It's not like they're like malicious towards pastors or anything.
Right.
But it's been very, very hard for me to get into schools and hang out with students. The only school that's allowed me is
our Christian
school in our
town. Of course,
town.
they'll let the youth pastor.
Yeah.
I hope they let the youth pastor.
I would hope so. And so that's been something that's been a blessing, but it's been something that's been really hard because it's like I can't go into your school and minister to kids, but you guys have to be there every day during the school year. So
that's
this
cool.
summer we're working on developing that in our students. So when we go back to school in August, that they're ready. Like, okay, I'm ready. I'm passionate. I know what the word says. I believe what the word says, and I can teach other people what the word says.
Yeah, I will say I'm not ashamed to say this, but I will say that there was a big excuse me, a big club that's very popular throughout the any state you're in, I believe, is FCA.
Yes,
And is it Fellowship of Christian Athletes? Is that what it's called?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay, and it's basically a how do you describe what that is?
It's basically a club where the Christian athletes,
Believers,
yes,
get together,
believers,
but
can
it's
get,
not only for athletes.
no, it's
So
not. I
it's
don't know why they call it.
I know it's kind of
athletes only.
misleading. So
I think
a
that's
lot of
how it started.
a lot of schools, yeah, FCA, and so for example, the school I taught at in Missouri, they had FCA. It was a big deal because it was a rural, very conservative town, so FCA was huge. So my school, remember, I'm from Houston, Texas, and so don't forget that
I try to every day.
I'm from Texas. All right, I'll stop. Okay, so bigger schools and all that, and so we didn't have FCA. We had an actual club called Christ on Campus,
Okay,
which is for all the
that
believer kids,
That kind of sounds cool too.
right? And I'm ashamed to say that I knew about it all 4 years, but I didn't try to get involved until like my sophomore or junior year,
Shame on you.
and I and I can't tell you why. But even then, when I tried to get involved, I didn't stay with it, and so one of my regrets I have is not being in that and being more heavily involved. I will tell you, the main guy that was in charge, he was, I mean, the perfect guy to be in charge because he was on the football team, all-star athlete, very popular and very well respected for his beliefs, you know? And so he was great. He was kind of the poster in the face. And so, but I could have done that because I had influence. I wasn't an athlete, but I was in band. Band was a big thing. I was drum major, all that stuff. So I had influence in the music with the music students, but I didn't. I should have done that, and I feel bad. But yeah, glad to hear about camp. The other update I was going to have you talk about a little bit was this summer you have 2 interns, right?
Yes, which is very exciting.
It just started a couple weeks ago.
Yes, so the week before we left for camp was their first Wednesday. So they come in from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m.
On
On a Wednesday. And so we talked about doing multiple days a week, but at the end we just decided, instead of doing multiple days a week, let's have them here on a day they're already going to be here later that
Smart.
day. And
Yep.
so we start out the day with staff prayer. So they come into staff prayer with everybody. We get to pray together. After that, we go into spiritual leadership training. So it's
I don't know that. I was always wondering what y'all do after that.
I could pull up my schedule.
Yeah, pull it up.
I have a schedule, so I don't get off of the schedule. So I know that this is what we're doing and this is what
That's
we're
what
supposed
schedules
to be
are
doing.
for. Yeah, obvious.
Correct. I just had to state that out loud. So we from 9 to 9:30 we go over the schedule for the day. 9:30 we go to prayer with staff. 10 to 10:15 we just give them a little break before. Then we start 10:15 and 11:30 we do leadership teaching. So it's basically just a time where I pray about, seek what the Lord wants to talk about in leadership. I write something out, and then not only do I preach, but we have an open conversation, which is the nice part about having just 2 students.
Yeah.
Is like the conversation can kind of flow.
The student-teacher ratio is smaller.
Yeah, and so then lunch from 11:30 to 12:30, and then 12:30 to 1 we do a team Bible study, which is basically
Very cool.
we sit, read scripture, talk about the scripture we read, and then pray together. And then from 1 to 4 is skill and leadership training, which is I'm teaching them things that I wish I would have gotten taught
good.
when I was
Yeah.
their age about ministry, different technical things that I know, teaching them the sound booth, all the stuff and how that works, the flows of service. Having open conversations about things that they want to learn, and sometimes I'm learning with them because we're watching stuff and learning. I give them from about 4:30 to 5:30 for just free time, and then we do a team dinner, which we provide the dinner for them. So we buy them dinner, eat together, talk, hang out, and then from it's about 6 o'clock till 7 when service starts. They help prepare stuff for service. They're in our leader meetings. They're helping with announcements. Kennedy Fitch is one of our interns, and then Lexi Swick. Lexi helps with some of our worship stuff because she's a really talented singer and she's trying to learn drums.
Very cool.
So we have Lexi helping with that. And then at the end of the night, they help me tear stuff down,
Turn stuff off.
turn stuff off, turn the computers off, everything like
That's
that.
so cool.
So it's not just me running with like a chicken with my head cut off, trying to turn off stuff, and
And
then
it's
talk
not
to
just
parents.
stacking chairs.
Yeah.
That's kind of the stereotype of church internship. I'm just going to stack chairs and
Yeah.
throw away communion cups.
And so they've been I think the thing I love about it is they've been so helpful and so like
so willing.
asking someone to do something that's like yesterday they
I was going to bring up
they
yesterday
painted
was-
some
yeah.
some stands that we had on the stage
Which, real
upstairs.
quick, you said you're teaching them stuff you wish you knew. That's something that you learn real quick is when you're at a church like our size, you'll have to do things to help other staff members. Whatever's got to be done, you got to do it.
Yeah, and so for that I was just it's almost like they're like, yeah, we're gonna go paint and stuff like that, and I'm like, man, I wish I didn't have to have them just paint and stuff like that, but they've been so kind and so willing just to do anything. Like there was one time I had to go do something. I was like, hey, could you guys just rearrange the chairs in the sanctuary? I don't care how you do it. And they were like, yeah. And then I got called like 20 minutes later. Hey, we're done. What do you want us to do next? And I'm like, oh my gosh, like that. I would have thought that would have taken you way longer. And so they're really quick. Both very, very
smart,
organized
very
people.
organized,
And
yeah.
for the future, for this podcast, they will be on.
Sweet.
And I'm going to interview them. We're going to talk about the internship, talk about what they learned, talk about things that they liked, and just have a good old conversation.
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 Yeah, it's been great to have them around. They sat in staff meeting too to get to know what that's like. I would love. These are your first interns you've had since being here, correct?
Correct.
Cool. And you're open and hope to have one. Have them.
Yeah, I'm
every
hoping
summer,
to do
right?
this every summer.
Very cool. I would love to have an intern as well for the same exact reason, to teach them what I wish I knew before coming into this position.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you, but my first few weeks, I learned a lot.
Yeah.
Like whenever, like I went to Evangel to study music education to be a teacher, and we learned about they teach you all this curriculum about psychology and how to take tests and how to all this stuff, which is very important. But I learned more my first few days of subbing in an actual classroom than I did all 4.5 years.
Yeah, that's what
When you're thrown in there,
Yeah.
you have no choice, but you've got to figure it out.
That's what I told the interns. I said, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I went to Bible college. I sat in the classroom for 3 years.
Yeah.
And I said, I learned so much more doing ministry
Oh, yeah.
and hands to the plow
Definitely.
rather than sitting in a classroom.
It's true.
That's also because I just learned better doing that stuff. But just doing ministry, just being there, loving on students. I've been in youth ministry now for 8.5 years. And so it's just one of those things that's like, I learned so much. Like I did internships. I was an intern for 2.5 years at the church I was at.
Yeah.
And when I started the internship, I went up to our pastor and I said, hey, I know I'm going to be a youth pastor someday. And I know I'm going to be up in front of everybody talking. I'm going to be the face. And I was like, right now, I want to learn the background.
Yeah, it's good.
And I'm glad I did because I'm just in a place right now where I do all the background. I have people that help me and I have people that can help me, but I do a lot of the background stuff and I don't mind doing it because I built that ethic in myself doing ministry. And I know that with ministry comes a heavy weight and a heavy call of responsibility. And I'm glad that I had people that invested into me personally. My first 5.5 years of ministry, I was just doing background stuff. I was working hard. I was helping set up events. I was helping plan events. I was helping do that stuff. And then it wasn't until the last couple years where a youth pastor I was serving under was trying to develop my preaching skills. And so this whole time I'm like, man, I need to develop my preaching skills and stuff like that. But the whole time, really, I believe that the Lord was developing character.
Oh, yeah.
Because you hear a lot of the downfalls of people in ministry these days.
Yeah, we'll come to that here in a second.
Yeah. Come to the downfalls of people in ministry today. And one of the things I never want to do is I never want to have my character be lower than the call that I'm in. I want my character to match it and almost be even be better. That I know that my character is going to withstand when the things get hard. My character is going to stand when it's not easy to have character. And so that's one thing that I'm glad that was instilled in me in an early time in my ministry, to have character with what you're doing, because you just see a lot of people these days that don't have character in ministry. They portray it.
Put on the face.
Yeah, they portray it. They put on the mask of
Very
character.
good at doing that.
And then, behind the scenes. And I'm not dogging anybody.
Of course
'cause,
not.
We all fall short.
We all
but-
do. Yeah. That's great. I never did a church or worship internship, but I did do student teaching before I taught, which is required, which you learn a lot there too.
Oh, yeah.
But again, subbing taught the most. And then, of course, my first teaching job taught more.
Yeah.
And it's very similar in ministry. You get your first part-time job or first full-time job or first internship. You learn a lot. You see a lot. So I think these students are going to be really thankful for the summer and to you for giving them that opportunity to do all that. And that's great. I hope that continues. And like I said, I hope to do that with anyone who wants to be a future worship pastor. I don't know how that would look. I've brought it up to Pastor Johnny before, and he's all for it. But what I would do is I'd probably reach out to one of our AG colleges because they always have students who are studying and hoping to be worship pastors, and just say, hey, we're Restoration Church, Sioux City, Iowa. Come and for the summer for a couple months or something, and then have them kind of. I'll build a schedule like you. I'm gonna take notes from you, and have a schedule and have them help out. And and it's funny too because like the Lord's so funny because I was a student teacher and then a teacher. I'm probably gonna adapt a lot of that schedule. How that worked when you're a student teacher is you basically are like an extra pair of eyes, and there's a whole chart we followed, a whole timeline, and over time the teacher slowly gives you more and more time to teach. And then eventually you're the main teacher and you've reversed roles. The main teacher is the extra pair of eyes. The student teacher is doing the teaching, right? Then you slowly flip the switch backwards. And by the end of the school year, the main teacher is back in charge. So pretty ingenious.
That is pretty. I always, in leadership, they always taught us that when you're teaching somebody how to do something, the first step is you tell them how to do it.
Yeah.
And then you show them how to do it. Then they do it with you. And then they do it and you watch.
Yeah.
And so, and that's always something that I've tried to do is like, I'll show you the first couple of times.
Yeah.
I'll walk you through it, have questions and stuff like that. But eventually I'm going to let you do this. And I need you to give yourself a little grace.
Yeah, of course.
And that was something I told them too and then you probably experienced it in your time, but even starting here for me, I had to give myself a lot of grace because I've never been a lead youth pastor before.
I've never been a worship pastor.
I mean, I had, but it was for a very small youth group, and I came in and was very blessed with a good-sized youth group and stuff like that, but I had to give myself a lot of grace because I'm, looking at the grand scheme of things, I'm 27 years old. When I started, I was 26, and
You were 26?
I was 25.
Or were you 25?
Yeah, I was 25.
Yeah.
I was 25 when I started.
Young.
Yeah, I had to give myself a lot of grace because, I'm in a district where a lot of like the core youth pastors that are around that haven't switched are like 30s.
They've been here a while.
Mid 30s, and they've been here a while and stuff like that. And I'm like, I want to be like that guy, but I'm like, Scott, give yourself some grace. I'm sure they were just like you when they were your
Yeah,
age.
you have to start somewhere.
And so that's one thing I just encourage the interns is give yourself some grace.
Yeah.
So
Definitely. And you definitely have to give yourself grace when you first start because it's your first time doing this, first time doing that. Not everything's going to work.
And just to be super transparent, super honest, I think the best part about where I am is the fact that our pastor just gives us so much grace.
Yeah.
There's multiple times that he's asked me, hey, can you get this started in youth? Can you start doing this stuff? And, trying to juggle like 16 things at once, brand new to ministry and stuff, brand new to like full-time ministry. Pastor Johnny's just given so much grace, so much. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, you're only saying that because you work for him. But if you know me, I don't lie. I'm not going to.
You lie to me a lot.
I'm not going to say something just to make someone look good. If I'm complimenting you, I'm being very honest and being very just transparent. But Pastor Johnny gives us a lot of grace to do what we do, and a lot of grace and empowers us majorly to do what we do. And that's been something like that for me has been, such a blessing because I came in, stressed, having anxiety, like, oh, I need to get this stuff done. Like he would ask me to do something. I would leave his office and try to do it right then and there just so I could get it done. And it's gotten to the point where I'm like, okay, I can't build a curriculum in one day, And so it's been one of those things that he's just given a lot of grace and a lot of compassion and a lot of wisdom. That's another one of my favorite things is that he was a youth pastor.
I was about to say that, no pressure, but he was youth pastor for many years, and he was a very good youth pastor for many years.
And that's the thing too. We sat down and he was like, Scott, I just want to be honest. He's like, I know I tell you, I give you these ideas because I was a youth pastor.
Yeah.
He's like, you don't have to do any of
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
He's like, I'm just giving you tips and advice that help me. And I said, no. I was like, don't ever apologize for that.
Yeah.
I was like, because that's something
Inspiration.
that helps me
Yeah.
so much. And I understand, he was a pastor in the
I was
late
gonna
90s,
say
early
time
2000s.
was a little different. In
So
the
times were
90s.
different. Ministry looked
Some of
different
those
back then.
ideas won't work.
Some of those ideas, but he always says, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just got to put a new spoke on it. And so
Yeah.
I don't have to use
That's
his
yeah.
idea in whole. I don't have to use his wheel, but I could take it and put some spokes on it. And
I mean, that's how the
revise
church
it.
world is. Like, the message is the same, but the way we deliver it is going to change vastly. Hopefully, it should change.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, this podcast is a perfect example of that. This is very, very common now, and I'm thankful for Pastor Johnny and our church board who supports this
Oh yeah.
and sees that it's a ministry. It's not just us twiddling our thumbs, wasting our time. What are we going to talk about today? We're trying to be effective.
Yeah, and the board and Pastor Johnny letting us chase a dream because this is the dream for both of us.
I never
remember when
thought
I
this would
first
happen like
started.
this.
You and I talking, and we were just like, man, you know how fun I remember I told you, I was like, I want to start a podcast. I
Be
wanna-
so cool.
I want
Yeah.
to do a youth ministry podcast. And you were like, I want to do a ministry podcast. And we were both just like, why don't we
Let's just
do it together?
Let's try it. Yeah, really
And
cool.
So we cleaned out the space, and they've allowed us to buy a few little pieces of equipment to be able to do it.
spread out, yeah. But I will say a lot of the stuff was laying around. You can't see everything,
yeah.
but a lot of our lighting and our rigs and our monitors and stuff you can't see behind the scenes. It was already here. We're just putting
Yeah,
it to use.
all these can lights back here,
Yeah.
all these lights.
We're gonna use these can lights for the next 50 years. They've been,
all-
and
all
so
those lights shining on the curtains back there, those are all reused. Those are old lights that.
the legs of this table recycled.
Yes.
And so we're that is something I as a strength of mine is putting stuff to use that's just collecting dust, But anyway, you touched on something I wanted to talk about a little more in depth. You mentioned about character. I don't remember what you said, but it triggered this. But very recently, there's been quite a few big name pastors who we've learned disappointing things about, or I don't know how to word it. There's been some controversy amongst very big name pastors, and I wanted to talk a little bit and pick your brain about a few of them. We talked about it a little bit in private, but I wanted to get it on tape, Sometimes Pastor Scott and I go to lunch or we're in a car and he starts talking deep. I'm like, no, save it for the podcast.
We literally were driving yesterday. He was dropping me off after work or something, and we were driving, and we were, we're gonna film a podcast tomorrow. And he's like, I was thinking we could talk about this, and then I start going. He's like, stop, save for tomorrow, save for tomorrow.
Save it for the podcast. I'm gonna go a little out of order. I'm gonna start with. So there's three I want to talk about. And you know all three of them.
I just want to preface this conversation with this.
And I'm going to preface as well, but go ahead.
know.
Go ahead.
I want to preface this with this, that us talking about this is not putting these people down.
Correct.
It's not us saying that we are better than them,
Correct.
that we are doing things that are better than them.
Correct.
This is us talking about issues. Because we were talking about it yesterday. We brought up the fact that, when's the point that we give those pastors grace?
Yeah.
And when's the point, as a pastor, we're held to higher standards?
Yeah.
And so we're talking from a place of we're not judging, we are not hating, we're not trying to paint them in a bad light.
Right.
We are just having an open conversation about it.
Yep. And I want to double down on that preface and say that I'm only 30 years old and I haven't done ministry full time for almost 3 years.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sitting here on a high tower like, if I would have been in his shoes, I wouldn't have done that. I'm not saying that. Again, I'm just bringing it up because it's relevant and because we have the time to talk about it. And I just wanted to pick your brain on it and shed some light on it. But I'm going to go a little out of order. I'm going to mention three names. So the first one I want to talk about, I saw, this was last week, I think. I'm from Texas, and there's a lot of big church, which two of these pastors are from Texas, by the way. Stop.
Texas people.
And I was just scrolling through YouTube or Twitter or something, and it said Tony Evans steps down. So Pastor Tony Evans is a pastor in the Dallas area at Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship, I think is what a church is called. Huge church. It's got like 10,000 or over 10,000 members, and he grew it. He started, I think, in the 90s or 80s. Great, phenomenal. Have you ever heard any of his sermons? or read any of his books?
No.
He's one of my personal favorites, and he's always been a personal favorite.
Which one? Wait, which one was it?
Tony Evans. We grew up listening to him on the radio. He's got a radio program called The Urban Alternative. It's basically his messages. I've read more than one of his books, which is it says a lot about me because I'm not a reader.
Yeah.
But he's great. He's very good. His strength is he knows how to explain complicated spiritual or biblical principles, but he has really good illustrations that just make it click. He's really great. But anyway, been there for many years, and there was a headline that said Pastor Tony Evans steps down, and I'm like, what? I was in shock, and so I opened the article. I have a screenshot here somewhere, and we really don't have details, and they really haven't shared any details. But all that he said was, well, I thought I had a screenshot. All that he said was, and it wasn't streamed. They stopped streaming, and then they kind of shared the quote. But he told his congregation something along the lines of, don't quote me on this, but something along the lines of, I have to live up to the standard that is held up to everybody else. And he said, I had not good judgment, not godly judgment or something like that, and so I have to step down because of sin. Mm-hmm. And that's all we know. That's all it says. And of course, all the news stations start reporting it, and like, oh, what do you think it is? All people try to start guessing, which we don't know what it is. I don't know if we'll ever know what it is, but it had to have been something significant.
It's not our, really, if he doesn't want to share, it's really not our business to know true.
And so he stepped down, and they have someone stepping in interim, but it was just, it was kind of, I'll be honest, I'm going to use the word disappointing, because let's be real, again, let's be transparent. This is the age of, and I hate saying this, but it's true, it's the age of celebrity pastors.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
Yeah, no.
A lot of people that watch these pastors online and stuff like that, we almost worship them. We don't mean to, but we hold them to such a high standard, and we almost think that they live perfect lives, which they don't. You had mentioned that scripture, all have fallen short. And so when someone like that of a high profile, steps down because of sin, we're like, wait, what? And it seems so disappointing. Yeah. And it's so hard for any church of any size when your spiritual leader has done something that is sinful or some kind of backslide, and they have to, and first of all, very difficult to do what he did. And no matter what size, if you have 100 or 10,000 or 50 in your church, if you're the spiritual leader and there's something that came up in your life and you've got to step down because of what you did, it's very difficult to stand in front of your people and say, hey, I did X, Y, Z. So what I do want to say is good for him for doing that, because I don't know if we would have found out about this. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, that was the first one I saw. But I brought that up first because I was taking that in, actually, and I sent my family, because my family, we have a group text that we text through, pictures, videos, all that. And I texted them a link to that news story, and I'm going to find it here and see what they said. Because, again, we grew up listening to him. I still listen to him. He's great.
While you're looking for that, I'll touch on the fact that he, as a pastor, I agree. We are held to a higher standard. We are held to...
That's in the Bible.
Yeah. We are held to be leaders to our flocks. And, I only serve a youth group of 80 to 75 students every week. But it takes a bold person to stand up in front of their congregation and say, hey, I've messed up. I need to take some time away, and
and that's not us excusing the behavior or the sin,
not at all.
We're just
obviously
acknowledging that's the right thing to do.
Acknowledging it and him taking care of it. Him
of his
seeing
10,000 members. Yeah,
that's a scary task.
All right, I sent this to them, and my sister said I read about that, and then my dad, of course, being the spiritual man he is, he said, I can't believe it. He said, of course we don't know what happened, and God is a God of second chances.
Yeah,
very true, and we tend to forget that, especially in this culture today. People, get canceled or whatever over something that happened a long time ago, which brings me to the next one. So Pastor Tony Evans stepped down. We don't know what it was, but he came forward and said it was because of sin. Again, I don't know what that means, or no one knows, and maybe we'll find out more. Maybe we'll find out today, later, or by the time this posts. But then a couple of days later, I see another headline that says mega church pastor accused of sexual assault. And I was like, And then when I saw the name, I said, no. There's no. So it's Pastor Robert Morris. Pastor Robert Morris, another Texas mega church pastor in the Dallas area. Really great preacher and teacher. Have you heard him before?
I've heard a sermon from him. But
Robert Morris, Gateway Church.
Books or anything.
Great teacher, great,
I'm not one preacher. Of the all hail Texas people,
Whatever. Notice I didn't deny that. Me neither. Anyway, It said resigned due to sexual assault or whatever, and I was like, huh. So another great preacher built a great church. This one I did take screenshots of. This is from USA Today. Pastor of a megachurch in Dallas resigned Tuesday, 2 days after admitting to inappropriate sexual behavior with a young lady. So what's interesting about this one is he actually came forward in the past. He's been pastor for a long time, and he told a previous church board, "Hey, I had an inappropriate relationship with a young lady," but he just used the term "young lady." What happened was, now it's come to light, the details. The lady came forward very recently, and we learned that at the time she was 12 years old. And so this inappropriate behavior was when she was 12 until the time she was 16, and he was 20 at the time. So again, very. I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's not right. But he, I think, so he resigned amidst all this, and the current board at his current church, Gateway Church, said that they were aware of an extramarital affair. Like he came clean about that, but he failed to mention the age of the girl. It wasn't even a lady. It's a 12. I mean, that's a 12-year-old. And so they came forward with that. And so I remember the allegation came out, and I was like, oh no. And then he resigned like a couple of days later. And so that begs the question of, is should he have not gone back to ministry? So what happened was, back when he was 20 and the girl was 12 and that was going on, he actually sought counseling and he stepped away from ministry for 2 years. And then he came back and then eventually planted this church that exploded to this one's over 100,000 members because they have multiple campuses, not even including their online viewers. But, it's, again, no matter how you look at it, it's always disappointing to see a great leader, teacher like that, that's had such impact, reveal, hey, I did this, I messed up. But I also, and again, this is not defending his actions whatsoever, but Pastor Scott pointed out in the scripture, all have fallen short. We have to remember that these pastors, no matter how great they are at what they do, no matter how big their church is,
Are people.
they're people. They're just like you and me, or you listening or watching. They're going to fall short, right? We all have sin in our lives, and we all are going to have sin. It's just the way it is. And we have to remember that. We can't hold them to such a high standard of their living perfect lives. Now, are they held to a higher standard? Absolutely, because they're teaching the word, and they're supposed to, call it like it is and stuff like that. But they're still human. We're still going to mess up. You know what I mean? And so I think they're still in search of a pastor. And again, it's so hard. I know a lot of people think, oh, well, they're a mega church, they'll be fine. No, it affects big churches, small churches, which brings me to the last one I was going to talk about. Did you have anything to say about Robert Morris?
My sister, my oldest sister, I was going through a season where just stuff were happening, and we were talking about it, and we were she was just speaking in my life. And there was just a lot of people coming against me, saying things about me that weren't true. And she said something that is an eternal truth that I will never forget, and that she said, everybody that's in ministry, Scott, they're still people.
Yeah.
They still have, and she said, they're still people, and people will be people till the day we die.
Yeah.
We are humans that have a battle in ourselves between our flesh and what we really desire, the things of God, and never to say that to justify. But the fact is that this is definitely something that should have been taken care of
Definitely.
a long time ago.
Yep.
And to have a growth like that, of a church size that big and a ministry like that, and have that happen is can mess with people. Because I had a girl that I knew in college that we were just really good friends. She hung out on a friend group and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it was probably right before we were about to graduate. We were just talking, and she just looked upset, and I asked her what was going on, and she said that her spiritual father, who was someone that helped raise her, basically this guy and his wife helped raise her and stuff like that, and he was a deacon in the church, and basically poured into this young lady, him and his wife did, and just made her to who she was then, which she was a strong Christian, a believer, and he had an affair, and it wrecked her, and to the point where I don't have contact with her anymore, but from her posts on social media, it appears that she is not living a Christ-like lifestyle. And so that's another weight that we have to carry in ministry, is that there's people, for me, let's just use me as an example.
Mhm.
Me, I have students that look and I have open, honest conversations with me all the
Yeah.
time about their lives, what they're dealing with. And for me to encourage them, Pastor Johnny says this all the time. If I'm going to preach something, I'm going to live it.
Yeah.
I
definitely.
cannot preach something that I'm not living. I cannot tell you to do something that I would not do myself.
Right.
And to know that the consequences of what we do don't just affect us as ministers. It does not just affect, oh, I have to step down from my church. I'm not getting paid. Blah, 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 whatever. No, the people that you have ministered
It's a
over the
ripple
years,
effect.
they can say, well, is my faith really
Yeah.
real?
Yeah.
If he would do that,
Yep.
did this encounter that I had when this minister prayed over me, or
Right.
was that real?
Yeah.
And it not only has people questioning your character, but it has people questioning the character and the weight of what you spoke into their life.
Yeah.
So much so that they could walk away from the faith.
Mhm.
And so,
That's probably going to happen here
and
in both
yeah,
of those
yeah,
congregations.
both of those
sadly.
cases.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things, that's a part of the weight, is like, not only do we have to live what we're preaching and we have to do that, but you have to know that the reason why you're called to live to a higher standard is because there's people's lives at stake.
Yeah.
There's people's faith at
Eternal lives.
stake. Eternal lives. There's that is at stake, because I don't want to ever get to heaven and stand before the Lord and him say, because of the way you acted,
Mhm.
so and so walked away.
Mhm.
Because of the
Take that escalator down. No.
and take that as yeah.
That's not how it is in
Yeah.
the Bible.
And I don't ever want to stand before the Lord and him say, well, you could have acted like
yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I tell my leaders all the time is, I used to have a bad temper.
Mhm.
And
You
I
still
don't know
do
why I'm
around
doing-
me, but
I don't know why I'm doing this, but the Holy Spirit's kind of leading me in this direction.
Sure.
I used to have a bad temper, and we had a situation happen last summer camp with a group of girls, and I was heated.
Mhm.
I was upset. I was mad. I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to yell at them. I wanted to tell them to shut up. I wanted them to listen to me, blah, blah, blah. And it was crazy because as I was walking towards this situation, I just felt the grace of God come, and I knew in my heart that every day these girls get yelled at.
Mm.
Every day they might be getting yelled at home. I'm not going to be that person.
Yeah.
And so when I walked into that conversation, the grace of God and the peace of God came on me, and I was able to have an honest, open conversation with students. And as leaders, we are called to, and I know it's so hard sometimes to be the bigger person.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in youth ministry, when kids like, I know everything. It's harder to be that person. But at the end of the day, to look someone in the eyes and say, I'm sorry that happened to
Yeah.
you, even though you weren't the one that did it. You never underestimate the power of a sorry. But
Oh, yeah.
to go back to, we have a weight on us because we're not only playing with our lives, we are not only speaking into our lives, we're speaking into other people's lives. And to speak into someone's life and then to tear down the walls and say, hey, that time during that time where I was praying over you and the Lord called you to ministry and the Lord healed you, I was having an affair, and I'm sorry, but that's something that we can't do, that we have to make sure that we're living what we're preaching.
Yeah. It's true. It's a ripple effect. It's not just you and your family that's going to be affected. It's the people that follow you and the people that the Lord gave you the ability and the opportunity to shepherd.
Yeah.
It's going to affect them as well.
We serve a God of restoration.
Of course, a
We
God of
serve
second
God of
chances, like my
second
dad
chances
said.
that cares about us, that is rich in mercy and grace for us.
Yeah.
And that's great. It's great that, even as a pastor, that God has all the grace in the world for us. But that's not a reason for us to take
Yeah.
advantage of the grace.
Which is the other thing I was going to talk on too, was that it seems like, and I hate to compare the two, but there was this movement of these like actors that were coming out and saying that producers and directors did inappropriate things and stuff. These directors and producers went decades without getting caught, so to speak, thinking that they wouldn't come out. And what I want to say is, whatever we do, no matter how hard we try to hide it, it's going to come to light.
Your character will always find you out.
It's going to come to light. Whatever you try to hide, it's going to come out. And for example, Pastor Robert Morris, decades pastor, decades, no controversy. And he's like, I think he's in his 60s. Something that happened in his 20s, he's now facing the consequences of. it happens. But the last pastor I was going to bring up, one that you know a little bit more about.
Yes.
Who am I going to talk about?
I'll let you say it.
Pastor Mark Driscoll, who is no stranger to controversy. And again, this is not us saying we know more than him or anything. I'm just bringing this up. Gosh, we could do a whole hour on this one too. So my introduction to Mark Driscoll was there's a band called King's Kaleidoscope. Awesome, one of my favorites. They do really unique music.
Really good.
And when I first listened to them, I saw that their record label was Mars Hill Music, and I'm like, what is that? And I looked it up, and it was the church they're part of, Mars Hill Church. And I saw that Mark Driscoll was the pastor there, founding pastor, and pastored there for a long time. Well, then I came to work here, and your predecessor, the previous youth pastor, he recommended a podcast called The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. And I was like, okay, sure. And so
that podcast was great, but equally made me angry, sad, and also hurt, but also like, man, God is so amazing.
God is amazing. And so I listened to that podcast and I was like, oh my gosh. So in a nutshell, the podcast just goes through Pastor Mark Driscoll's time as pastor at Mars Hill. And there's just a lot of spiritual hurt and a lot of just not accountable behavior that went on under his leadership the whole time he was there. However, what we're saying is God is awesome because that church exploded. It was huge, multi-campus. They were ahead of the game with technology, streaming. They were like on the level of like a big budget film or TV show. And on this podcast, they have former members come forward and talk about like the hurt they experienced or how they were faithful for many years and how he reacted to this or that. And all the while, you're just like, you think about it and you're like, all those things, all those stories, allegations, if you want to call it that, if they're true, he's still up there preaching every Sunday. You know what I mean? And so what I was getting at was, like I said earlier, it doesn't matter the church size.
Yeah.
There's going to be, ripple effects like you just said. Well, when he stepped down from Mars Hill, that church like almost obliterated like overnight almost.
Yeah.
Humongous church.
Multiple campuses.
And it just didn't work. Once he left, there was just so much hurt, so much in the split, and it just didn't work.
I'll enter my experiences to Mark Driscoll. I never heard of him in my entire life. Didn't know what he was. Didn't know who he was. I started working here, and I just overheard a conversation of people talking about the podcast and how they had listened to it, and it was really eye-opening and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, I'll give it a listen to it someday. Never did. And then it was 3 months ago. When was that conference at?
Oh gosh, yeah, that was
a few months ago. That got brought up, and someone played a video of who he was. And I had no idea who this guy was. And I said, oh, my goodness. I was like, I've heard this guy. I said, I know who this guy is. I just didn't know it was that guy. Because, you have Reels.
Yeah.
I was on Reels, and I have a lot of, like, sermon clips pop up.
You've seen them before.
Because that's what and one of the sermon clips, he popped up, and he was saying some stuff about marriage. And I was like, that's not true. Like, that's not. It was just unhealthy theology, if I'm being honest. And I was like, I need to listen to that podcast. And so this last month, in the month of May, I drove to Oklahoma twice. I went to Oklahoma once to go visit some friends and go to her graduations. And then took my mom back to Iowa with us. And then 10 days later, I took my mom back. And on the way
all that road
back,
time,
I listened to the podcast the entire way, which is 8.5 hours. And on the way there, I listened to it all the way there. So I got through all of the content in 2 8-hour trips, which to say the podcast is long. It's very long. But I remember when I finished the podcast, I texted you and I said, wow. I was like, the podcast was so well made. And 2, my heart as a pastor was so heavy because even more so the understanding of, man, there's great authority and power in the positions we hold. But like I said earlier, it was the moment, like even more so, I realized like I need to make sure that I'm consistently developing a character so my calling doesn't like out precede my call. My what did I just say?
I don't know.
So my calling, my inner beliefs and how my character is
Yeah,
what
yeah,
the
yeah,
word I was looking
character,
for.
yeah.
So my character isn't lesser than the call that God
There
has
you
given
go.
me.
That's it. Yeah.
And so it's one of those things that's just like, man, some of those stories were just wild.
Oh.
To hear people talk about how like the stories and the things that he would do, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some of them just were heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
And no, I mean, really, no need to even go into the stories
Exactly,
because
yeah.
they're not our stories.
Mm-hmm.
But man, it inspired me to be a better pastor.
It also made
inspired
me
to be a
thankful
better
for
person.
where I work at.
Oh,
because
100%.
this was back when I first started. That's when the podcast came out, and I listened to it, and I couldn't stop listening to it. And I had started this job, and I had, I'll say, I have to use the word complaints about certain things and how they were run or stuff like that. Man, when I listened to this, I was like, you know what? I have it pretty good, you know. It just put a different, gave me a different vantage point of this job and this organization and this body, and it makes me so thankful for it, you know.
Yes, there was times that people had conversations with me. There was one that came up to me, and I won't name who they were, but just looked me in the eyes and was like, "You got big shoes to fill. Let's hope you can do it."
Yeah.
Patted me on the back and walked away.
Yeah.
And I was like, that was very discouraging.
Thanks a lot.
That's not something you should ever say to someone that's new into ministry, new
Yeah.
into a full-time ministry, new into this church. But I can say that this church has been so welcoming.
Yeah, and you know, whether you're Pastor Mark Driscoll, Robert Morris, Pastor Tony Evans, Scott Veronese, Pastor Aaron, Pastor Johnny, we're all human, and we're all going to fall short. And again, these things that people may try to hide, they'll come to light. You know, the Lord God is a just God as well.
Yeah,
He has final say, and I didn't want to, and I'm glad we didn't go as deep into these things because that's not what I wanted. I didn't want to. Plus, if you go to YouTube, there's so many videos on like the truth about Mark Driscoll or what really happened behind the doors of Robert Morris's church. You got to be very careful what you look at, by the way. But that's going to keep going.
You need discernment.
Yeah, you're going to keep seeing that happen, and I'm sure by the time this posts, there's going to be more not allegations, but more details and more things that unroll and stuff. And I got to tell you, I have a prediction, okay? I think this may continue happening. And again, there's so many others. There's Brian Houston, Pastor Brian Houston of Hillsong. There was a situation there. There's a lot. And again, I think that celebrity pastor status is so dangerous of a mindset. But by the time you land there, you don't realize you're there. You know what I mean?
People, let's for a second call these celebrity pastors. Let's call them giants. Mm-hmm. People are waiting to see giants fall.
Yeah.
They're waiting to see these big churches that have big numbers fall. I mean, you can look at any ministry that has big numbers, has big people. Mm-hmm. There are people making videos on, oh, this is what they're doing wrong.
Right.
Oh, this is what they're saying. Oh, this is blah, blah, blah. And like dissing them and trying to, I mean, no one's ever going to agree. Mm-hmm. No one's ever going to be like, you're the perfect pastor. Mm-hmm. I agree with no one's going to say that. But I feel like we are in a season and a generation as humans where we are just waiting for giants to fall, giants in the church, pillars in the church to fall. Mm-hmm. And it's unhealthy and it is unnecessary.
Well, you've probably seen memes or little cartoons, political cartoons. I've seen one where, and let's go to school setting. There's one of it said the year 1994, and it was a parent-teacher conference. And the parent was really upset at the student. Said, "Can you explain this grade to me?" They were upset in front of the teacher.
Yeah.
Then it's 2024. It's reversed. Now the parent is upset at the teacher. "Can you explain this grade to me?
Yeah.
Can you explain this F to me?" People's mindsets are so different now. Yeah. And like you said, they want to see that giant fall. They want to see someone else be accountable for that and not themselves, which Pastor Ben Miller, who has been on here multiple times, we talked about a similar topic, and he said the same thing. He said, man, we're going to fail. You know what I mean? There's no perfect human. The only perfect human that walked face there was Jesus. Yep. And we can live by his example and try to live as good as we can like him, but we're never going to, we're always going to fall short. Correct. And I also have to say, I feel led to say this too, Mark Driscoll, Pastor Robert Morris, Pastor Tony Evans, Jesus loves them. Jesus died for them. Again, I'm not excusing their behaviors or whatever they did or didn't do, but they're part of the family as well. Yeah. And we just have to pray for them and pray for your pastors if you're listening, wherever you attend, if it's here, if it's anywhere, pray for your pastors. Just pray that, the Lord always guides their steps, that they're always in the will of God, It's a lot. It's a very heavy spiritual, emotional burden that
Yeah.
I never experienced and understood until I got. And I remember Pastor Johnny told me when I first got this job, he was like, "This is a very you'll feel heavy burdens," and I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Like, honestly, at first I was like, "This is an office job. That's a breeze." You know what I mean? And how we open, we talked about how our weeks get filled and stuff. But I was a teacher where I was on my feet like 9 hours a day, and I get home and I'm physically exhausted. I'll be honest, I'm not physically exhausted when I come home from this job.
Mentally.
Okay, mentally, spiritually, I'm drained when I get home, and I'm just I need an outlet or whatever. But I really do think we may see a wave of other spiritual leaders and big pastors that are going to be accused of certain things, and there's going to be allegations and stuff like that. And this day and age of social media being so instantly accessible as well, it's stuff spreads like wildfire. It really does. And for example, you never knew who some of these guys were, but now you do. Now you look them up and you're like, oh wow, look. And so it's a very tough time to lead people. It's a very tough time to be a leader or a pastor. But if you live right and have discernment, you know what I mean?
The opportune time.
Yeah, there you go. I like that. It's the opportune time. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and along the lines of being hurt by pastors and stuff like that, for anybody out there that's listening, I don't know who this is for, but I feel like the Holy Spirit's
There's
asking
3
me
people listening. Go ahead.
asking me to talk.
And you and I are 2 of them.
to speak about this, but no matter where you go, there will always be church hurt.
That's a good point.
No matter where you go, there will be people that are misusing the gospel for their benefit.
That's good. Yeah.
Misusing the message of Jesus for their benefit and for their own gain. And I will encourage you in these 2 things. One, pray for those people. If you are experiencing and you're in a place in your life where you have church hurt, which is a very common saying around our time and age, is church hurt. If you're experiencing church hurt, or you have anybody in your life that has hurt you, I can offer you one piece of advice that's going to help you dramatically, and it is to pray for them. If someone has offended you, the Bible actually calls us to go to them and to explain our offense to them. And so go to them, pray for them. And if you are experiencing church hurt and you want to leave, I eagerly encourage you to pray where you were supposed to be. Because the church I grew up in is the reason, the people there and the people that helped develop me are the reason where I am today. But and I stayed there for 24 years, 25, because I turned 25 when I was still there. I stayed there for 25 years. I had a lot of opportunities to be offended. I had a lot of opportunities to take hold of church hurt and let that take me away from where God had me. And I had the amazing opportunity to say no to that.
Yeah.
I had times where I was hurt by leadership. There was times I was I was disrespected. But I am not saying any of this to say, whoa, oh, look at me, I'm blah, blah, blah. But to say that God gave me the courage to do this. God gave me the courage to stay where he called me to stay. I knew, I actually tried to leave 3 years prior to when I did leave. I tried to move to Amarillo, Texas to do an internship. And it was funny because they talked to me about doing I had moved someone down there to go to this, to be a part of this internship. I helped a friend move down there, and they were talking to all of us helping. They were like, oh yeah, would any of you guys be interested in moving down here? And I was like, I want to do ministry. That would be fun. And that Sunday at their church, their pastor, Pastor Loper was his name, he said, someone in here is about to make a decision and God's trying to get a hold of you. And I was like, that's somebody else in here. I'm making sound decisions. I want to leave. I want to come here. I want to help these people. Also to say that someone's need is not your calling. Random thought, but a need is not a calling. A calling is a calling. And in that time, I was like, that's somebody else. And he was just like, whoever that is, I want to pray for you. And the whole time I'm like, when is someone going to come down?
Yeah.
And then, it's a smaller church. It's not a big church.
Right.
Maybe 45, 50 people in the room. And I'm like, that's me. And And I went down there, and that pastor laid his hands on me and just prayed over me, encouraged me to stay where God had me. Don't make that decision. And then the Lord spoke to me and said, "You will know without a shadow of a doubt when it's time to leave." And I was like, "That's my word, and I'm sticking
You
to it."
received it, yeah.
And in the next 3 years that I stayed, I was offended. I was upset. And I had the opportunity to leave. I had many opportunities to leave. There was plenty of good churches. One of the churches that popped up was Transformation Church, Pastor Mike Todd. Like that was like the bumpin' church in Tulsa. Like if you were cool, you went to that church. I never stepped foot in that church once because I knew the power and the anointing that comes with staying where God has called me to stay.
Yeah.
And I stuck with that. And when me and my wife were praying to come up here, she was like, "Babe, I know we're moving to Iowa." And I said, "I understand that you know that, but I need to know that for myself." And I prayed, and the Lord told me, "Scott, you and Kendra and your family are to go to Iowa, and you are to go to Morningside Assembly of God and be an answer to prayers." And I'd been to this church 3 times prior. I didn't see anything wrong with it. I'm not saying like
Except
I was
for the
like
worship pastor.
I was like, you weren't the worship pastor. When
Oh,
I
not
first
yet?
came.
Okay. There you go.
There's a lot of great churches in this community.
There's a lot of churches in Sioux City that are
Yes,
great.
a lot of great churches. But those great churches are great for the people that are there.
You weren't
I
meant
knew-
to be at one of those great
Yes,
churches. You were
and
meant to be here is what you're
I
saying.
was meant to
Yeah.
be here.
Yeah.
And I mean, sitting here now, I know why.
Yeah. Because of me,
God,
right? No.
Because God had
me.
God knew you needed a friend. But God knew that there was a need, and He called me
Yeah,
and
that's
my
good.
wife and my family to fill it.
That's good.
But I say all that to say this: pray where you're supposed to be.
Yeah,
And if God
that's
tells you
good.
to stay there, no matter how hard it gets,
Yeah.
stay.
There's a story, I can't share details, but there's a perfect story that would tie into that. And maybe that's a topic we'll go into on another podcast. The other idea that came up, we kind of touched on, was covering church hurt on this podcast, a very common thing, sadly, but a very real thing. But before we go, I wanted to end on a lighter note. And you opened about camp, and I wanted to ask you of a funny memory from camp that you went through. While I let it sizzle in your brain, I'm going to bring it in. So I went to, this was Royal Ranger Camp. Again, I grew up Assembly's of God. Royal Rangers is like our outdoor boys ministry. Think of it like Boy Scouts, but Assembly's of God version. And it was my first one I ever went to. And this may shock you, listening, watching. It may shock you, but I am not the most outdoorsy guy. Does that surprise you?
No.
And I'm okay with that. I own it. Okay, that's just not how I grew up. I grew up in the city. You know what I mean? So I'm not the most outdoorsy person or guy, but I was going to go to camp because it was going to be fun. And now I'm not the I'm also down to do those things. You know what I'm saying? If you invite me to go fishing, whatever, I'll go. But it's not. Don't picture me like the. I don't know if you've seen The Parent Trap. The evil lady that doesn't know anything. That's not what I'm like. That's the first thing I can think of. But I'm down to do those things. I'm just not as knowledgeable. Anyway, so it was my first time putting a tent together. Camp. Okay, I'd never done that because again, I grew up in the city, and so they brought all the tents, and we're one of the bigger churches in our outpost. That's where a ranger talk. Outpost 3, shout out. Anyway, we were there, and they're like, okay, guys, find you a partner, and then put your tent together. And it was my first camp, and all these boys have been to camp before, and not me. So they had their go-to tent buddies, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, everyone's like avoiding me like the plague. I'm like, okay. I was like, you know what? I'll just grab this tent, put it together. And so I grabbed the tent, I get inside, I start putting it together, and this is so embarrassing. And I hope my friends are listening; they know who they are. I was putting it together, and I didn't do it a very good job up here, and so I was inside the tent, and it was kind of falling apart. And I thought my friends were messing with me. And so my friends told me this later, and they still laugh about it. They said, Aaron, you were inside the tent all by yourself. No one was there. And then you hear Aaron, say, come on, guys, cut it out. Stop. But like, it was nobody. It was me. It was me not putting the tent together correctly, falling apart over me while I'm inside of it. They were laughing so hard.
Oh, that's hilarious.
But that was a great Ranger camp, though. It was. I'm pretty sure I rededicated my life there. Whatever year that was. And so anyway, all right, quickly, and then we got to go.
I got 2 stories,
Oh,
and they're both
gosh.
small.
Okay, hurry up.
The first one was from this year. The last one was from last year.
Okay.
This year, I woke up, normal day at camp, go to lunch, go to breakfast, go to games, sitting at lunch. One of my students goes, hey, Pastor Scott, do you know what so-and-so did last night? I was like, what? and I got farted on while I was sleeping.
Oh my god.
One of the students walked over to my bed. Thank you, high school boys. Walked over to my bed and farted on me while I was sleeping. And so at first I was upset and I was like, I can't believe this kid did this. And then I was like, I would have done it if I was.
Oh my gosh.
And so I instantly thought it was funny and it was okay. The second one was the most beast moment I've ever seen from a student. It was awesome. We played this game. It's called Trash Ball. And so there's one big medicine ball in the middle of this field, and everybody's got a white trash can in front of them by their side. So it's one here, one here, one here, and one here. And so your team is standing by your trash can. You have flags around your waist, like flag football. And everybody has to go get this ball, and whoever gets the ball and brings it back to their side and touches it to their trash can gets a point. But if someone rips your flag off, you have to drop the ball. And the only people that can touch the ball are people that have their flags on. And so one of our students, his name is Julian, he was with us last year. He grabbed this ball, and he's running from the other side because all these kids are trying to get their flags on. He's running from the other side of the field. And he's got like 3 kids running behind him. And he's a track kid, so he's running fast. And by no means did he have to do this, but to this day, I'm so glad he did. He, instead of running and just touching the ball to the trash can, Julian grabs the ball with both of his arms, jumps in the air with the ball, and flies into the trash can.
That's awesome.
And I got it on video.
You do?
And it was one of the most amazing moments. Like, everybody freaked out. It was awesome. And so those are my 2 from this camp and last camp that I remember.
Awesome. Eventually, we will have Pastor Johnny on. His schedule just doesn't line up.
Yeah.
But he has a lot of hilarious stories of his time as youth pastor, associate pastor, and here. And so we could do a lot with him.
Not only does he have stories, he knows everybody's in those stories first and last.
He's very good at that. And so stay tuned. We'll get that. But I want to say a quick thank you to everyone listening or watching. Thank you so much. Again, we're still learning. And so we're gotten better than if you watch the very first one. It's very different.
Yep.
But please, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, like, comment, share stuff. Do it. And so we're looking forward to the summer. Got a couple ideas. We'll talk and see if we can do that. Pastor Johnny definitely on that list.
Yes.
But we'll try our best to keep things interesting, keep things relevant. We don't want this to just be Aaron Scott talking, even though that's what today was. But every so often we'll do it. But thank you so much for listening, watching. We're looking forward to see where this podcast goes in the future.
Yep.
We're just here to give you some hope and healing and give you something to do, maybe during your lunch break or before you go to bed or whatever. But Pastor Scott, thanks again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
See you all in the next episode, you guys.
Thanks for listening, and be sure to follow Restoration Podcast on Spotify and Apple. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe.